Welcome to another fabulous Yiboneh event. We're privileged to have Mendel Horowitz, which I'll introduce shortly. I just wanted to mention that tonight's shiur is in a refuah shalema for Orly Rachel Bat Yehudit Ruth, and an Elias Neshama for Karen Goldman, who just passed away this past week. Gittel Bas Konya Sophia. I just want to remind everyone to turn their cell phones on silent. And we have posters in the back for the other upcoming events. Really great stuff. A special chesed event that's not being advertised over there, but September 6th, we are having a hands-on chesed event at Yad Eliezer. We're looking forward to getting more volunteers. It will be very, not just inspirational, but you really feel you're doing something. I don't want to take any more of the Rav's time away, but there's a pasuk that I'm becoming more and more familiar with. The pasuk says, part of the pasuk is, Chesed v'emet yichupar avon. Kind acts and truth atone for sin. And we're now in Elul. Let's take it a little more seriously. Halavai, it should continue through the year, but it's a good reminder that we are now in Elul. And so I just want to introduce the topic, the Rav, and a little bit about the Rabbi. The topic is Fire on the Mountain, that's the title, and it's regarding divine intuition and personal responsibility, which is, key on for Elul. Rabbi Mendel Horowitz is a family therapist in Yerushalayim, where he maintains a private practice working with adults and children. And I know his brother very well, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say.
Hi. Like Rabbi Poston said, he knows my brother. He doesn't know me personally, and he never heard me speak, and he doesn't know what I'm going to be speaking about. So I don't know why he thinks it's going to be so fabulous. I guess I'd like to hear more from you if you think it's as fabulous as he hopes it's going to be. I guess I just want to start with two sentences about myself so you know where I'm coming from, and then I actually want to begin with a question. Like Rabbi Poston said, I'm a family therapist, but I'm not here tonight as a family therapist. He did not mention that for the past 20 years I've been teaching in a yeshiva in Har Nof, Yerushalayim, for American teenagers who come to Israel for a year, more modern Orthodox community, boys who come to study for a year or two or three before they go back to America to study in universities. So my experience teaching is mainly teaching teenage boys. I think this will probably be the first time ever that I'm speaking to a mixed gender audience, which is a little different than what I'm used to. So I'm coming both from the perspective of having been a teacher for 20 years, and I guess from the perspective of having been a therapist, and that's why I chose to speak about what I'm going to be speaking about. But I'm really not speaking as a rabbi or as a therapist, rather as a human being. And I think that this time of year, which I want to talk a little bit about what this time of year actually is, I find myself no different than anybody else, trying to self-reflect and trying to become better in whatever way that means to me. And I want to share with you one of the struggles that I have, and a point where I find that there's a little bit of a conflict. The title, Fire on the Mountain, refers to Mount Sinai, which we will talk about in a moment. And divine intuition and personal responsibility, where does one start and the other end? Where is it that we are responsible for making our lives better? Where is it that we can make an effort towards making our lives better? And where is it that, as we will talk a little bit perhaps about the 12 steps, where is it that we admit that we are powerless and we ask a higher power to take over because we can only get so far with our own efforts? So I want to start with a story. Last week I was camping with my family in the northern part of Israel. And it was about, I would say, 12 or 1 in the morning, and it was dark, and we had a little flashlight. And one of actually a niece of mine, came to the adults and said, "Whoops, I fell in the water." And there was a little pond next to where we were camping, and she had slipped and fell into the water, and she had lost her sunglasses, which she claimed were Ray-Bans. And she was all distraught. A teenage girl lost her sunglasses. And this was the middle of the night, the water was dark and muddy, and I said, don't worry, I will find them. I am a professional. And at the time, I had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. I was just trying to calm her down, figuring in the morning, I'll go somehow look for the sunglasses. Which I did. I walked into the water, and I did find her sunglasses in the bottom of this pool of muddy, dirty water. And at the time that I found the sunglasses, I started to think to myself, well, that was obviously lucky, right? There's absolutely no way that I'm professional enough to find sunglasses at the bottom of a muddy pond. So what was it exactly that I did that allowed me to find those sunglasses? I don't think that I'm an expert sunglass recoverer. I don't think that I didn't have any special equipment. I just really got lucky. But what I did was I put myself in a position to get lucky, and I think that's what I want to talk about. Where is it that we could put in our effort, and then where is it that luck, or whatever luck is, takes over? Does anybody have anything to say about that? Maybe we could start with a question for you, if that topic sounds like something that you want to hear about. Yes, okay. So let's, I feel like starting with another short introduction, and that introduction is from the Ramchal. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Ramchal. The Ramchal, there's a little introduction over here. Moshe Chaim Luzzatto from the 1700s, a very famous thinker, writer, rabbi, Kabbalist, and he wrote a book called The Mesilas Yesharim, The Path of the Just. And he begins his book by stating, Amar ha-mechaber ha-chibur hazeh lo chibartiv lelamed lebnei ha'adam es asher lo yad'u. He did not write his text to teach people anything that they did not know. And what he goes on to explain is that the purpose of his book was, on the contrary, to remind people something that they intuitively know, and to recommend to people that only as a result of reviewing and reviewing and reviewing and working and working and working will what they intuitively know actually be brought out, and they will actually be able to actualize what it is that they know. And the similar, taking a cue from Rabbi Luzzatto, I don't want to teach anybody anything that they don't know. I don't think I'm going to teach you something that you don't know. I think anybody who wants to grow, anybody who wants to change, anybody who has habits that they want to get rid of, thank you very much. Is it water? I think everybody here knows themselves. I think everybody here knows what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and they don't really need me to tell them that. But let's start with what this time of year really is, because I think it's, historically speaking, people sometimes don't know. Why is Elul so important? Well, Elul is a month on the Hebrew calendar, and it comes before Tishrei. Tishrei is the first month on the Hebrew calendar, which makes Elul the last month. And what's so special about this time of year, in order to really understand what's so special, we have to go back in time. And we go back in time to Pesach. Pesach happened in Nisan, which, according to another way of calculating the Jewish calendar, is also the first month. There are two ways of counting. Either Nisan is the first month or Tishrei is the first month. But without really getting into the details of that discussion, Pesach, the Jewish people got out of Mitzrayim on Pesach, right? Now, coming out of Mitzrayim on Pesach, everybody who had a Seder and everybody who experienced Pesach, we talk about Pesach being a time of freedom, emancipation. People are stuck in a place where they want to get out of, and it's very easy to use it as a metaphor for personal growth and development, because you're stuck somewhere where you don't want to be, you're a slave to whatever habits that you have, and you want to get out of that situation, and you want to grow, and you want to change. And that's what the Jewish people did when they left Mitzrayim. But we know that when we left Egypt, it wasn't simply that we wanted to be free, because the word freedom could mean a lot of different things. Somebody once said freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. And there's lots of different understandings of what freedom means, but the word freedom, according to the Torah, means that we want our choices to make a difference. That is the freedom that we began, the process of freedom, when we left Mitzrayim. And that process of leaving Mitzrayim and that process of emancipation was not complete until we received the Torah. So if you count up the days after we left Mitzrayim, what happens next on the Jewish calendar is the holiday of Shavuot. And in between Pesach and Shavuot is what we call Sfirat HaOmer, where we count the Omer, 7 weeks, 7 times 7, and then comes the holiday of Shavuot. Now, if I asked everybody what happened on the holiday of Shavuot, I'm pretty sure, because I've done this before, that I would get a similar answer from most of the people in the audience. So I'm not going to say it out loud. But I will tell you what I assume that you would say if I said what happened on Shavuot. Most people would say, we got the Torah. And that's the answer that my children give, and that's the answer that students give, and it's not true. We did not get the Torah on Shavuot. What happened on Shavuot was we heard the 10 Commandments. The revelation happened on that day, where we were told the 10 Commandments, either by Moses or by God, but we didn't actually receive anything. You could swallow that for a second. Trust me on it, it's true. We did not get anything. We heard the 10 Commandments. And that was the culmination of the Exodus from Egypt, because now, after we heard the 10 Commandments and we entered into a covenant with God, now our choices made a difference. Now we were able to choose between good and bad and right and wrong, and everything should have been according to plan, except that it wasn't. Because what happened on Shavuot was we heard the 10 Commandments, and then Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, went back up the mountain. And he was supposed to come down 40 days later with the 10 Commandments on the tablets. And 40 days after Shavuot was the day when the Jewish people sinned with the golden calf. And that day is commemorated as a fast day, the 17th of Tammuz. So historically speaking, as of the 17th day of Tammuz, the Jewish people still had not received anything other than that original revelation that had happened on Shavuot. Moshe Rabbeinu went back up the mountain for another 40 days. So far, it's 2 sets of 40, it's 80, and he came down again on Rosh Chodesh Elul, the beginning of Elul. And even still, then, the Jewish people had not repented enough for their sin of the golden calf, so Moshe Rabbeinu went back up onto the mountain for a third set of 40 days. And 40 days after Rosh Chodesh Elul is Yom Kippur, right? So Yom Kippur is a special day, not because it's a day of atonement. We know that it's a day of atonement because that was the day when we finally received the second set of luchot, the second tablets. And that is really the culmination of some process that began with the Exodus in Nisan. So the time of the year that we are in right now, what Elul is the beginning of a 40-day time period in which Moshe Rabbeinu was up on the mountain for the third set of 40 days, beseeching God for his forgiveness for the sin of the golden calf. So the reason why this is a time of year of introspection and rejuvenation and renewal and repentance is because that's historically what it was. And it was during those last 40 days that he was on the mountain where Moshe Rabbeinu was actually successful. And 40 days later, he came down with the second set of the luchot. So if you want to know when we really got the Torah, we got the Torah on Yom Kippur. Okay, so that's the history of Elul. That's the history of the time period that we are in now. You can pause if anybody has a comment or a question or a thought. Or not.
We received an oral version of the Torah, not the written one, Yom Kippur.
Right, well, okay, so we did not receive the actual, when you say the Torah, we did not receive the Chumash, right? We did not receive the 5 books of Moses. They weren't written yet, right? They were written either throughout the 40 years in the desert or at the end of the 40 years in the desert. But correct, what we did receive were the actual tablets. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu came down with the actual tablets, and in addition to that, an oral teaching, correct, an oral law. Yeah, but what we received were the actual tablets. And receiving those actual tablets was a tangible sign that we were forgiven, right? When they sinned with the golden calf on the 17th day of Tammuz, that's the day when Moshe broke the first tablets, which was a terrible thing. And receiving the second set of tablets was an actual tangible sign that we were forgiven. So when we observe Yom Kippur in another 30-something days, what we are observing is a day in which we receive the ultimate forgiveness by finally receiving the actual commandments etched in stone. Okay, let's move on. The next thing on this paper is taken from Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know how many people are familiar with it. I'm familiar with it just from reading. I'm familiar with it a little bit from different people over the years who I've met who've struggled with addictions. And I find this set of 12, I don't even know what to call them, and I don't want to call them the wrong thing. But I think they're astoundingly beautiful, and I think that by reading through them, which I don't want to do right now, they could really be a guide for self-help, for personal growth, for religious growth, for spiritual growth, for anybody. And I'm not the first person to notice that. Many, many, many greater than me rabbis and teachers and educators have made that connection before. But one of the things that stands out from the 12-step program, and again, the reason why I'm mentioning the 12-step program is because what that is really a program for people who want change. And repentance, which is really a terrible word because it sounds so Christian, is really not the right word. Tshuva really means to return. And what we're interested in is bringing out something within us that's natural, bringing out, I guess, more of who we want to be and who we can become. And that happens as a result of an introspective process, and it also happens as a result of asking for help. Now the question is, who do you ask for help from? So the way that the 12 steps conceives of a power greater than ourselves refers to humbly asking for the removal of shortcomings and the defects of character, and themes that are very much in line with, as Orthodox Jews, we believe are part of our growth, particularly at this time of year. But one thing stands out, and that is going back and forth between doing, I don't know if the word fierce is here, a fierce moral inventory, where a person will sit and actually think, what is it about my life that I want to be different? What is it about my life that I want to change? And taking responsibility for that. And at the same time, how could you take responsibility if you're saying that you're powerless? Where's that power for your change going to come from if it can't come from within? See, it's almost a paradox. If you're powerless, then you don't have the power to change. But you need power to change, but you're powerless. So what exactly are you supposed to do? And how are you supposed to get further in this journey towards returning? So if you turn to the next page, I want to learn with you something, or study with you something that I find to be incredibly fascinating. It's from a sefer called the Chovot Halavavot, which, in case you haven't picked up on, I don't really speak Hebrew that way. I would say the Chovos Halavavos. I don't know how many people here speak that dialect of Hebrew, but the Chovot Halavavot, or the Chovos Halavavos, or the duties of the heart, whatever you want to call it, was written by a rabbi, and Wikipedia calls him a philosopher, Rabbi Bachya ibn Pakuda. And Rabbi Bachya ibn Pakuda composed what really is a book through which people can grow and change and live and learn and develop. On the one hand, using their own power, and as in a moment we will see, really relinquishing or admitting that we are powerless and needing to rely on divine intervention. So the part that I want to study with you is the Shar Shmini Shar Cheshbon HaNefesh. And there's the original Hebrew on top, and then italics is, I don't really know how literal the translation is. I found it online. So in this chapter, the author, Rabbi Bachya ibn Pakuda, is talking about, it's not at the beginning of the book. You see, it's the 8th gate. So there were already 7 gates of personal growth and development by then. But at this stage of the process, he says, what a person needs to do is cheshbono im nafsho al ma sheyesh biyacholto mimaisa avoda. A person needs to look inside and discover within him or herself what he or she is actually capable of. What are my abilities? Like looking in the mirror and saying, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. I really need to be honest. And sometimes people are not honest with themselves. Sometimes people think that they can't do something and they really can. And sometimes people think they can do something and they really can't. And what he's talking about is a really serious type of introspection where a person comes to understand really what is within his ability and what isn't. That's step one. And step two is lahasmid aleh v'yaratz v'yecharatz la'asosa ad shetashiv lo leminhag. I see there's a misprint there. But a person needs to go over, I don't know who's following in the Hebrew or the English, there's a misprint in the Hebrew, but a person needs to review after he or she discovers what he's capable of, then needs to review that again and again and again and again and again until it becomes second nature. And after it becomes second nature, I'm going back and forth myself between the Hebrew and the English. V'yavakach yishtadel lahosif al ma sheyesh b'yacholto v'yichsaf lo b'libo v'yala olav b'machashavto v'yishal me'akel le'ezro ula'amso al yoser mima sheyesh b'yacholto min ha'yediyah v'ha'maisa b'lev. So if you go along in the first paragraph there in the English, what he says is that a person needs to do a moral inventory. A person needs to think, and a person needs to be diligent and review over and over and over again, what am I capable of and what am I incapable of, and what am I really, really, really capable of and incapable of, and I need to review that over and over and over until it becomes second nature. And then what? What do you do after it becomes second nature? Then you beg God to give you an ability that is beyond your current ability. So what he's talking about is what we mentioned before, this junction between how much can I actually do, and then at what point do I need to step back and say, I can't do any more, I need some help here. But when do you reach that stage? So according to him, you reach that stage only after what in English, I'm just reading in English, diligence and zealous introspection, that a person turns into a habit. And when one perseveres more and more in this, the Creator will fulfill his request and open for him the gates of his understanding. And he continues with, or maybe he doesn't, or maybe he does, yes, on the next page, page 3, an analogy, and talking about a skill of the trade. And this is where perhaps we can go back to the sunglasses in the mud. Learning the skills of a trade and learning mathematics. When one who learns a trade in the beginning, we will do only parts of it according to his understanding and less than his ability. When his understanding of the trade strengthens and he persists in it, the Creator will enlighten him to the general principles of the trade and its fundamentals, and he will be able to deduce new branches which were not taught to him by other people. Now, I don't know how many of you like to cook or like to fix cars. Just let's pick cooking and fixing cars. If you've ever watched somebody cook who knows how to cook, it looks like an intuitive process. But it's not really an intuitive process because this person has spent years and years and years perfecting their process until it becomes intuitive. And car mechanics are the same way. If you bring your car to a car mechanic who's been working for many years, he seems to intuitively put his ear to the engine and know what's going on, but that's not really intuition. That's an intuition that came after many, many, many years of hard work. So too says Rabbi Bachya Ibn Pakuda with personal growth and development. A person needs to know himself or herself. And a person needs to be honest and fearless and moral and to look in the mirror and say, this is what I can do and this is what I can do. And if there's something that I can do that's little, I'm going to do it over and over and over and over and over again. And if there's something that I can't do, I'm going to try to do it over and over and over and over and over again. And what's going to happen is at a certain point, if you ask for it, you will, if you're lucky, you will receive this divine gift. And at that moment, your efforts will change from the efforts of somebody who's working with his or her abilities to somebody who's working with efforts that are a little bit more intuitive, and that intuition, according to him, is divine. So there's a point where your efforts go to, and then your efforts stop, and the inspiration sort of takes over. And if we change the word to inspiration, really, I mean, anybody can Google for famous quotes about inspiration. Everybody knows that inspiration only comes from somewhere, right? A person could be inspired, but that inspiration usually comes from putting yourself in the right place at the right time, and that is a result of effort. So I want to move on. Any questions about that? Does anybody find that to be interesting? I mean, I found it to be interesting because the 12 steps does anybody know what year that's from? Maybe the 1930s?
Yeah.
Anybody? 1930s, so the 12 steps came about in the 1930s.
34, it was written in 1939.
Okay, so the 1930s, which was slightly after this book was written. And I just went through, I don't like sitting and reading text to people, so I'm just sort of paraphrasing, but if you go back and you read it inside, you'll see that that's what he's talking about. He's talking about a process through which a person takes responsibility for his abilities and his shortcomings and works on himself and works on himself and works on himself and works on himself and then herself and gets to a point where the divine takes over, and then there's all of a sudden there's a revelation or an inspiration, and you realize, hey, wait a second, I'm working with a set of abilities that I never realized that I had, and all of a sudden I'm able to do something that 5 minutes ago I wasn't able to do. I see this point where you switch is a difficult point to get to. And the question is how you get to that point. And I just want to share with you one thought from the davening in the morning. I don't even know how to describe this in English, so I'll just say it in Hebrew. There's a point in the morning prayers where we say the Kriya Shema, the morning Shema. And before the morning Shema, there's a number of different prayers, the different blessings before the Shema. And one of them mentions a bunch of different attributes, so to speak, or abilities of God. And one of them is Oseh Hadashos, that God renews, he makes things new. And actually the end of that blessing is we talk about HaMechadesh Betuvo, that God renews things in his creation. We're not dealing with a static creation that was created a long time ago, we're dealing with a creation that is rejuvenated daily. We sometimes see it, we sometimes don't see it, and we sometimes try to tap into that energy where we feel rejuvenated on a daily basis. And one of the ways that we do that is by praying. And when we pray, we say the statement that God is the one who renews. And right next to that, we say that God is the one who wages war. Right? That's in bold, it says over there, Oseh Hadashos Bal Milchamos. And there's a juxtaposition where we talk about God being the one who rejuvenates and God being the one who wages war. And it dawned on me one morning, why do we say these two things together? What does one thing have to do with the other? What is the fact that there's a world that is rejuvenated daily? What does that have to do with waging war? And I think the answer is because it's really hard to rejuvenate. It's really hard to do something new. Anybody who's ever had any kind of a habit, it doesn't have to be an addiction. It could be an addiction to, I don't know, something stupid. It doesn't have to be an addiction to a substance. It could be an addiction to a behavior. It could be an addiction to a way of thinking. It could be an addiction to anything. And the only way to renew your relationship with that thing, it's like a war. I mean, it's not like a war, it is a war. It's a battle, it's a struggle. It's, oh my gosh, I need to defeat an enemy. So what we're saying in the prayer is that God does both of those things because we're acknowledging that renewing yourself and rejuvenating yourself is a battle, it's a war. It's combat. It's like, and that is what this time of year is. It's not that, okay, it's Elul, I'm going to say a few little psalms and blow a horn and my life is going to change. It's I need to go out to war and I need to fight a battle. And who has energy for that? I know I don't. After July and August, during our vacation, you go camping, you go do this, that, or the other thing, and all of a sudden somebody says, hey, guess what? Time to fight a war. And I say, well, I don't really want to. Maybe ask me again sometime later. Not interested in fighting right now. But that's really what we have to do. And if we want to get to Yom Kippur with any sense of renewal, then we need to spend time fighting a battle. So how do you fight battles? Because what we're saying is the only way to get that divine inspiration is if you fight a battle. But where do you get the energy to fight a battle from? So for that, I want to learn with you something in the Chumash. And something very interesting in Parshas Shmos, in the Parsha where we wind up camping at Har Sinai. And it's written here in Hebrew and English. And this is a quote from a sefer called the Shem Mishmuel, which was a Hasidic rabbi in the last 100 years. And he said the following. If you look in the Chumash, it says, in Shmos, Perek Yutes, chapter 19, B'chodesh hashlishi l'tzeis b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim b'yom hazeh bo min Bar Sinai in the third month from the time that the Jewish people left Egypt, on that day they arrived at Mount Sinai. Right? It's a simple narrative. We left Egypt in Nisan, and then we had the 49 days, and then we arrived at Mount Sinai. So the pasuk, the verse, sets it up and says, okay, we arrived at Mount Sinai. That's beautiful. But if you look at the next verse goes back and says, Vayisu mi Refidim vayavo midbar Sinai. We left a place called Refidim and we arrived at Mount Sinai. Now, the way that we understand the verses is they are very precise. So verse number 1 said we arrived at Mount Sinai. Verse number 2 says we left the place where we previously were and we arrived at Mount Sinai. But that doesn't make sense because the first verse already said we arrived at Mount Sinai. Right? Is the question clear? Right? So which one was it? When did we leave Mount Sinai? And when did we leave this place called Refidim, where we were before Mount Sinai? And when did we arrive at Mount Sinai? So the Shem Mishmuel says an amazing thing. To me, when I say amazing, I mean to me, I don't know if you'll find it to be amazing. But Rashi explains that the word Refidim, it's a name, it's just the name of a place. But in the Chumash, the names of the places have a meaning to them. And Refidim, according to the way Rashi explains, means that they were removed. The word Rafu means that you were removed from something. And the way that the rabbis understand this is that in this last town, so to speak, that the Jews were in before they arrived at Mount Sinai, they were removed from the whole idea of Sinai. Meaning, in simple English, they were at a low level and they really weren't ready for receiving the Torah. And that's where they were. They were actually physically in that place and they were emotionally in that place as well. So here is where the Shem Mishmuel, this rabbi, says what I find to be an amazing teaching. When you are in a situation that you cannot get out of, when you are in a situation where you experience yourself as very distant from your goal, how do you actually get out? Now, once you get out, you can start the process. And you can start the process of working on yourself, like we said before, and struggling and waging war and getting this divine help. But how do you actually take the first step, which is the most impossible step to take? So he says something fascinating. He says that the first verse that says that we arrived at Mount Sinai, we didn't really arrive there. We arrived there in our imagination, which I find to be amazing. Now, if you look back again at the verses, what he says is, on the third month from when the Jewish people left Egypt, on that day they arrived at Mount Sinai in their imagination. And then the next verse says, they traveled from point A to point B and they arrived at Sinai. And what the Shem Mishmuel is teaching us is that the only way to ever get out of that hole that you're in is to have a good imagination. And if you can imagine yourself somewhere else, then you can actually get somewhere. But if you can't imagine yourself somewhere else, you will never get anywhere. You can't even start waging war because you can't imagine success. You need to be able to close your eyes and imagine success, even if you can't yet do it. Because if you could close your eyes and you could imagine success, or you can keep them open and imagine success, that's even better. Then what happens is you can start the war, and you could start the struggle, and you could start the process, and you could move yourself further and further away from that mindset to a mindset where maybe one day you will merit that divine intuition and that divine help. Yeah.
Just to go back to the 12 steps that you didn't want to quote. Number 2, it's just after you admitted you were powerless and you had no possibility of managing your own life, you came to believe that a power greater than yourself could restore you to sanity. And I think that's the point you just touched on, because if you didn't have the imagination, it's possible.
Right.
Or perhaps those people sitting in the rooms and seeing the lives of others who've changed brings that imagination to possible reality.
Sure. So a little quote there from William Blake. If you go to Google and you write, inspirational quotes about imagination, you'll get all kinds of things. But this is one that I liked. What is now proved was once only imagined. And I think that we've all experienced that in areas of our life where we imagine something and then we go out and do it. But what usually happens is then we forget that that's how it started. And it starts with imagination. Anything that we've ever done started with imagination. Anybody who came here tonight had a thought about what it was going to be like before they came here. And if you could zero in on that imagination and you could apply that imagination to anything in life, so then you can start a process of growth. But you can't start a process of growth without at all first having a process of imagination. Anybody want to share something about their imagination? Or not? Or maybe? Right. So I'll just share one thing about myself. Like I said earlier, I'm not an addict, and I am not personally familiar with having worked through the 12 steps. But I am a marathon runner. I have completed complete marathons. And when you say one step at a time, it's really true. You need to be able to imagine yourself somewhere. You need to be able to visualize yourself at the finish line of whatever it is, whatever process it is, whatever growth it is, whatever development it is, whatever situation you want to get out of, whatever situation you want to be different. You need to have that imagination. And the question is, where do you get that imagination from? So some people get that imagination from looking at other people. Some people get that imagination from having groups that they attend where they hear about other people's struggles and they are inspired by that. Some people get that imagination by having close family and friends, and very often you can get that imagination by looking at children who live in imaginary worlds and are always, always, always imagining new worlds and changing, and they're dynamic, and they're sometimes people are old in years but young at heart, and they have imaginations. I know a rabbi of mine had a neighbor, a woman who was in her 90s, and this woman showed up at his house once with a brand new shaitel. I'm looking around the room, I don't see that many shaitels, but I think everybody knows what a shaitel is. So this woman walked into my rabbi's house with a new wig on, and he was surprised, and she was talking about her new wig, and she said to him that she just wanted a new look. And he's like, what? You're 93 years old. And this woman just wanted a new look. So she went out and she bought herself a new wig. And the story was so inspirational to my rabbi, who then passed it on to me, where it really doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are, where you could always be finding something in life that's new and exciting and fresh. And if you could use your imagination, you can get far. So I just want to move on to what's the final thing on this paper, and then we could perhaps relate it a little bit to Rosh Hashanah, and then really, if anybody has anything that they want to share, I would like hearing from somebody else. Page 4, which is the back of this little pamphlet, is a little piece over here from Reb Tzadok HaKohen Rabinowitz of Lublin, who was from Lublin, and according to Wikipedia, was a significant Jewish thinker and Hasidic leader. And he wrote a sefer called the Tzidkas HaTzadik. And he describes something that is similar, I think, to what we've been discussing. And to review, what we've been discussing is the process through which a person takes responsibility for his or her life, struggles and works hard, has an imagination, and at some point, divine inspiration or personal intuition kicks in. And he describes the following process. I'm going to read it in English, not in the original Hebrew, but the original Hebrew is there for anybody who wants it. As soon as a person wants to return, and he's talking about returning to God, returning to a better way, he comes to purify himself. And the law is to help him, as it is written in Yoma. What this is referring to is the Gemara, the tractate of Yoma. And there's a saying in the Gemara, Haba letaher misayin oso, that if somebody comes to purify himself, God will help him. So what this rabbi said is that if a person comes to return, then he gets divine help. And then when a person gets the divine help causes him to want to return more. And if he wants to return more, then he gets more divine help. And I think you could all see where this is going. So there's like a snowball effect. And in the end, success. And he writes, until the opening like the tip of a needle becomes like the opening of a great hall. Now in English it doesn't really sound exactly the way that it is in the Gemara, but what this means is that you can take a slight opening. If a person has any type of slight opening in their heart or in their intellect, and that opening all of a sudden could become a vast opening. How does that happen? It happens because of this process, where you started and God helped, and then you took the help and then you invested more. So if you have more to invest, then you invest more, and then you get more return, and then you invest more, and you get more return, and before you know it, the process is complete, right? And I think it's very beautiful. But this rabbi, Reb Tzadok, was a serious person. And after he finished writing that paragraph, I could imagine, he said, wait a second, there's a problem with this whole description. And he himself asked the question. And the problem is, and yet how can we explain the many individuals who want to return and cannot complete the process? Because guess what, it doesn't always work. I could tell you that it didn't work. Sometimes I've started many, many things. There's a lot more things in my life that I've started than things that I've finished. So it's really nice to describe this process where you start something and then you get this divine snowball effect and everything works out in the end. But it doesn't always work out that way. So how do we explain that? How do we explain that people start things and don't finish them? How do we explain that people have a moment where they want to become better and then they're just not able to become better? Or they can only become so much better and then they stop becoming better and then they fall slightly short of where they want to get to. How do we explain that? And the answer that he gives is really mysterious, and I don't really want to get into his answer because I don't really understand it. But he says the only reason why it doesn't work is because there's some kind of Kabbalistic, for lack of a better word, demon that gets in the way. Like, according to nature, it should work because you're coming to do something good, and then God is helping you, and then you should use that help, and the snowball works. But we see it doesn't work, right? How many people have seen that it doesn't work? Where you have good intentions, and then in the end, it falls through and it doesn't work. I've seen it. So according to Reb Tzadok, he says that not working is the result of some demon that comes and gets in the way. Let's not talk about that. But the next paragraph is fascinating. Yeah. I'm sorry? Right, exactly. We think and we think and we think, and then in the end, it doesn't work. So he says that is because of this demon that comes. But what he says in the next paragraph is astounding. He says, the antidote for the demon, and my advice, is to maintain happiness and confidence, that surely Hashem, out of his abundant kindness and mercy, will accept the repentance. Again, it doesn't really sound as good in English. But he says, we have this demon getting involved. This demon comes and gets in the way. How do we get rid of this demon? He says, you have to be happy and confident. Because even though it's not working now, in the end it will work. So what he's describing is a process, like if we go back from the beginning, we have this process that starts with imagination. We imagine our lives being different. And once we imagine our lives being different, we start this process of introspection and becoming better. And once we imagine, and then we start this process of becoming better, and we work on it, then we get this divine help. And sometimes this little demon gets in the way. And how do we defeat this demon? With happiness and confidence. And what this rabbi says is, if you think about the different sounds of the shofar that we blow, and I don't know, different customs, Sfard and Ashkenaz blow different amounts, different times, but in the morning after Shachris during El, we blow a shofar. And the sound of the shofar, the first blast is one long straight blast. And then you have 3 short ones and 9 shorter ones, and then you have another straight blast. And in Hebrew we call that the tekiah, the shvarim, teruah, and the tekiah. And the Gemara tells us that the sound of the shvarim and the sound of the teruah are supposed to mimic the sound of crying. That's actually what the Gemara says. So we are mimicking the sound of crying. And there are different ways that people cry. Some people cry in what the Gemara describes as the short way or the long way, and one has a lot of short sounds and one has broken up into other sounds, but they're wailing, they're sounds of wailing. And that wailing, according to this rabbi, is the wailing of the bitterness of this demon getting involved in our lives and not letting us fulfill where we want to get to. But he says you have a long sound of joy at the beginning and a long sound of joy at the end. And what you need to have is a long sound of confident joy at the beginning and a long sound of confident joy at the end. And in the middle, yeah, of course there's crying, because this process is not easy, because it's a battle and it's a struggle. And like we said before, it's a war. And its introspection is not pleasant. And to look in the mirror and to see things that are not pretty is not pleasant. And to struggle and to work hard towards any type of personal growth and development is hard. And it's, you know, it's nice to pretend and to dance around, but the struggle inside is hard and difficult. But what this rabbi says is you need to have that blast of the shofar at the beginning and the end, because you need to have some type of confidence and some type of joy. And within that confidence and that joy, the struggle is in the middle. So you need like a little sandwich of struggle with confidence and joy and imagination. And what he describes is, if you look through the Tehillim, the book of Psalms from King David, lots of what King David talks about are struggles in life that he had, from experiences that he had, that were difficult experiences. And he was pretty hard on himself. You know, you could open up the book and you'll see the way he talks about himself. And he's pretty hard on himself. But what this rabbi points out is, even in those chapters where he's really hard on himself, he starts off by singing a song. And he ends off by singing a song. And he sings a song at the beginning and a song at the end. And in the middle, he's really hard on himself. So this time of year is that time exactly where we need to be hard on ourselves. Because if we're not hard on ourselves, we really won't get anywhere. And if you pretend to be introspective, or you don't, or you're not moral, you're not fearless or fierce enough with yourself, then you won't change. Then you'll start to fool yourself. But if you are fearless and you do struggle, you need to struggle with a confidence and a joy. And if you do struggle with an imaginative confidence and joy, then we can get through the next 40 days and we can get to Yom Kippur and we can achieve that salvation. And everybody in their own personal struggles can, like we're told, by the forces of nature, that those are the forces of nature that God created, that with his help we can get out of whatever personal Egypt we have, like we began with. We had the Exodus from Egypt, and then 49 days later, and then 40 days, and another 40 days, and another 40 days, and then finally on Yom Kippur we get the Ten Commandments again. Everybody could achieve whatever it is they want to achieve, both with personal responsibility and divine intuition and imagination and confidence and joy. And with that, maybe somebody has something to share, a question, a comment, a thought.
Is it possible to relate that to the thought you had in the beginning of positioning yourself in the place to receive the luck, as you mentioned in the beginning? It's all about being in a certain time, in a place, and those sorts of things can happen more often than you. How can that relate to this ending?
I'll
Basically, what I'm
answer.
asking is, okay, so spiritually, how can we be luckier in that sense? How can we achieve this?
Okay, so I'll answer you. A lot of students where I teach often ask about the prayers on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the high holiday prayers. They're long, and a lot of people don't like them. I guess it depends where you are and if they sing or if they don't sing, and some people think they sing too much and some people think they sing too little. And what I always tell people is that, well, I tell people, first of all, prepare yourself for the high holidays. Like, make sure you have a comfortable chair, and make sure you have a machzor, a prayer book that you're familiar with. And if you need one in English, take one in English. And if you need one in French, take one in French. And if you need a book with you because you're going to get bored, so bring a book with you. But be there, because you never know which moment is going to work. And like the Yom Kippur is 25 hours. And Yom Kippur, let's just pick on Yom Kippur. It's 25 hours, and you're fasting, and you're there in shul, in the synagogue, for 25 hours. Sometimes, some people are there actually for 25 hours in a row, but you're there for 8 hours in a row, 10 hours in a row, whatever it is. You never know at which moment the song is going to really affect you. And if you're not there, you're not there. And if you're not open to that experience, it's not going to happen. So I think, I don't know, get yourself a rabbi, get yourself a teacher, get yourself a friend, get yourself a book, and put yourself in that situation.
The search.
Yeah, put yourself in that situation where you never know when you're going to get lucky. You never know when that moment is going to happen, but you want to be there to be able to catch it when it happens.
Interesting question. If you allow me also just to add my 2 cents.
Sure.
So I have a friend, actually passed away recently. His name was Chaim, but he played basketball when he was young, and his coach called him Herb. Right? It's a name, right? Herb. Herb. Anyway, so he played and played, and he was unhappy because the ball wasn't coming his way. So he said to his coach, "What's happening here? The ball, they're not passing me the ball." He says, "Herb, you had me in the right place at the right time." No. Think about it a second. The word mazal, you used the word luck in the beginning. We translate mazal as luck, mazal tov. But what does it really mean? Makom, zman, la'asot. You have to be in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. So we have an instruction manual called the Torah. So that teaches us what to do. And we have to pray to Hashem and do the hishtadlut to try to keep up as the 12 step, the program. Get with the program, right? That's all you have to do is get with the program and daven, try your best to be in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing.
Chaim from Yerushalayim? Is that who you're referring to?
No, I wasn't. Chaim Eisler. He was playing basketball, so I mean, Chaim I can't really.
Okay. Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of people in the 12-step program, and most people who do get recovery have fallen on their face. And you had mentioned that you just went on vacation, and now's a period where people are going to go to shul, and they're going to hit themselves, and there's going to be change. And I disagree with that in the psychiatric field, and I think I haven't seen changes of Jewish, Christian after they do their Hail Marys, or people after the High Holy Days make changes. I've seen people make tremendous changes after they fall on their face and when they're in therapy and they really know and want to make change. But I don't see the changes with religious people.
I don't know if it's a question. I think that.
No, it's just
Observation.
awareness that I don't see it in religion. I don't see that unless you really recognize that you really have a problem, you really want to make a change, hitting yourself or fasting doesn't do it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I don't think hitting does anything, and I don't think fasting does anything.
Okay.
And I don't think, I think the process that I began describing is the only thing that works. And that is a process that's difficult, like you said, where you hit rock bottom and you
Right.
say, I cannot do this anymore. This is not working. There's something wrong with me.
Right.
That's the only way that it will happen. I could share with you that I went once to a weekend retreat, and there was a man who got up to speak at the end, and he actually was my roommate. His name was Lucky. I don't know if that was his real name, but that's how everybody knew him, as Lucky. I remember he was a man, if I'm not mistaken, I would have guessed he was in his 60s. His name was Lucky. And he stood up at the end of the retreat and he said, people thought that he had been clean, I think it was for 20-something years. And he got up at the end and he said he's starting from day one. And people couldn't understand what he meant. And he said, I'll tell you why I'm starting from day one. He said, because for 23 years I have not had any alcohol. But last week I drank a non-alcoholic beer. And I need to start again. And for him, drinking a non-alcoholic beer meant that he needed to start all over again. So when he was counting, and he was counting, and he was counting, and he was up to 23 years. And for somebody who's up to 23 years, and he's well known in his community as Lucky, and he stands up and he says, no 23 years, one day. And he was starting, I took so much strength from that, because that meant that this person was really serious about what it is that he was doing. And he wasn't fooling, he could have fooled anybody, but you can't fool yourself. And I think sometimes in religion, people sometimes can fool themselves. And I think that's the value of having a close friend or a good rabbi or a spouse where they call you on where you're not being honest. So I don't know if it's really the fault of the religion or it's the fault of, somebody once said, don't judge a religion by its practitioners. I think religious people can be introspective and can grow and change, but it's not easy. I will definitely agree with that. It's not at all easy.
Just to add, for the sake of the argument, there's no real argument here. The history of the 12-step program came from a fundamental Christian group who basically walked around with their Bibles, and we all know where their Bibles came from. So the principles are eternal and true, and they apply to when somebody is deep down in the pit of Egypt and needs to be lifted out. Exactly what we went through.
So I was going to say something that like picks on a little bit each bit. So there are like two things that it's important to say. The first one is that you might not see a connection necessarily. For example, a person who's into addictions, who's into a bad lifestyle, you might not see objectively a relation of their fixing with a certain particular time of the year. Maybe it's not related necessarily with Rosh Hashanah, with Yom Kippur, but spiritually there is a way why every day is special. So if it doesn't happen on Rosh Hashanah, it happens 1 month after or before. But there is no way you can get away from the fact that ultimately when the person ultimately does the tikkun in their lives, it's got to do, there is a religion factor there. It doesn't matter if they do it through religion, but it messes with their soul, and it will always be connected. It's a business of the soul. Doesn't matter how you look at it. So they might not do it through religion, but it's connected to the soul every time. And if they fix it successfully, there's no way they didn't do it other than looking into their soul. And in that way, it is always religious. It is always related to religion.
Well, I would just, I think I could put the two things together, and if you look, I don't know anybody's name here, so I can't refer to you by name, but if you look at the sources that I brought, you will see that what they're really talking about is something difficult. I think I would agree with you. They're not talking about a process where you do this. A rabbi of mine once said, if we would do this with an ice pick, then maybe we would feel it. Maybe we would feel it. But even then, probably not. So I think at least my religious teachers taught me to do things seriously and to not be fooled by the externalities of the religion, but rather what King David talks about in Tehillim, where he talks about in his Psalms, real personal work where you realize, hey, wait a second, I've really hit rock bottom. And he explicitly says that numerous times. But just to do it with some kind of joy and confidence, and to know through this higher power, which people seem to find strength in. I know who my power is. Other people could describe their higher power how they want. But like you said, tapping into some kind of ability that seems beyond me is really what we're talking about.
I just happen to be very familiar with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and when we talk about people who cannot recover, it says that they don't seem to have the ability to be honest with themselves, and some people are just incapable, psychologically, whatever. I think for the most of us, it's also difficult, as you mentioned throughout this lecture, that to look in the mirror is extremely painful. But only once you hit that rock bottom, it's as if you had no choice. And that's where the imagination needs to kick in, or else it's lights out,
Right. Anybody else? Anything else? That weekend that I attended was one of the most inspirational weekends that I've ever had. Yeah.
I really like what Rabbi Tzedek Cohen said about that. Yeah, sure. So, I just thought it was really beautiful what you were talking about. Rabbi Tzedek Cohen said about that the antidote to someone who wants to do tshuva and the demon is to be happy and confident. And I think that part of could be that maybe something that he was referring to, the demon, is that like when you start, you get like, you know, we get inspired, and like everyone's made the same New Year's resolution like a million times, you know. Some people have succeeded. I think a lot of people make the same ones every year. And they're like, this year I'm gonna do it. This month I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna start, you know, changing it this time. And then we get inspired, and then like a day later, or 2 days later, a week later, all of a sudden like all the insecurity and doubt and fear start like flooding in. And instead of being like, oh yeah, okay, now what? We take it to heart in a really deep and powerful way, and it discourages us from like being open to the divine inspiration that you're talking about, you know. And so I think that maybe, you know, so to stay happy and joyful and confident is really, I think, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me that like that's what he's saying, like to stay grounded in the process, that like God is pouring inspiration down on you. And are you like a vessel? You need that like teeny tiny opening to be, you know, like if you're joyful and confident, then the like fearful and insecure and doubtful and disappointing thinking will like, you know, pass fairly quickly. So I just think it's really beautiful that like this is like describes this like beautiful process.
I also think it's beautiful. That's why I mentioned it.
Thank you.
And I think to put the two things, I keep just coming back to the comment that you made. I think when I hear this, this idea about the shofar blasts, right? And you have the long one, and you have the crying one, and you have the long one. It's not that I think that, okay, I'll blow the shofar and then my life will be better. But if I combine the two things and somehow this teaching will allow me to stay confident and happy, then that's where some of the things in religion wind up working for me. Because the symbols are really strong and really powerful and really meaningful. So they're not hocus pocus magic. You don't blow a ram's horn and change your life. But if blowing that ram's horn and knowing that that ram's horn has been blown for thousands of years by people, and there's thousands of years of history in that ram's horn, and there's thousands of years of crying and introspection and teaching, then that could be inspirational, at least to me. So I just want to share that with everybody. But I think what you said, doubt and insecurity, is really the worst. Doubt and insecurity. There's lots of other teachings about how doubt and insecurity is really the worst. But that's for a different time.
Did you want to add anything about the sunglass story? Because
the sunglass story.
Completed that.
The sunglass story. Well, first of all, it started with a total false confidence, where I said, I'm a professional, I'm going to find your sunglasses. I mean, that was just...
That was to your daughter?
Actually, not my daughter, to my niece. But what I did is in the morning, I waded into this muddy pool, and I thought to myself, okay, if I was a pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses, and I was hanging off of the t-shirt of a young teenage girl who bent down to get something from the water and fell in, what would I do? And I sort of felt around on the floor with my feet. I guess the water was about 3 feet deep. And I sort of, got a sense for what the terrain on the bottom was. And there's some rocks. And then I noticed that there was like a little cliff in the water underneath the water line. And I said, okay, well, if I was sunglasses, I probably would have fallen over there. And then I would get to the edge and I would just fall right off. And then I'd probably be in the mud right at the bottom of that cliff. And that's where they were. So it really wasn't rocket science. It was lucky because I could have just as easily not found them. And by the way, they weren't Ray-Bans. But I put myself in a situation where I said, you know what? I thought about it. I said, okay, if this, then this, then this, then this, then this, and I put myself in that situation. And for me, it just became a way of conceiving of my own life, of like you were saying before, you were saying before, about putting yourself in a situation that allows you to get lucky. So whatever it is, just think about your life. Think about the times in your life when you got lucky. Like, let's say a person, I once read a story about a baseball fan. I don't know how many people are familiar with baseball, but a baseball fan who had caught like 30 or 40 or 50, I don't remember the number, a crazy number of foul balls. Does that mean anything to anybody? You know what I mean? So how does that happen? I mean, I've been to baseball games and I never caught a foul ball. But he studied it. Like, he studied the different ballparks and the different hitters and where the foul balls usually get. And then, like, so is that luck or that's not luck? But, I don't know. And I think if you think about your life and you think about all the situations where you were being successful in whatever battle or struggle that you were in, think about the circumstances. Think about where you were when it happened. Think about what your attitude was, what your mindset was, what you were wearing. I don't know. Like, really go into details, and then maybe you'll get lucky again.
Can I say something? With the glasses, my daughter was in Itania and she lost her glasses. It was late one evening, so then it was just too dark, we couldn't see anything. So the next morning we went really early, my wife and I, and it was like a miracle, we actually found it. But the thing is, if we wouldn't have gone, we thought, what the chances, like 1 in like a million. But by going there and just having a look, so it was like, but we made a bit of effort, and I think
There
that's
you
what we
go.
did.
Right.
We could have said, like, what's her chance? So,
I should have called you.
no, but by actually going there, we thought there's no ways we'll, but let's just give it a try. But we actually went and we had a look and we found it.
So I think that's what you were mentioning before, that confidence, that happiness and that confidence, and like, yes, I can do this. Like, whatever it is, I can do this.
On Shabbat, somebody shared a story that there was a man who wanted to break, I think it was the 4-minute mile or something like this. And so he said nobody had ever done it, and he had set it in his mind, and he trained, and he worked very, very hard for it, and he was going for it, and he finally broke it, and he did 3:59. Like that, he made it. But after he did that, all of a sudden, all these different people started breaking it as well. Like, it became something that it was just something that he imagined he wanted to do, nobody had done it, and he worked for it, and he achieved it, and once he broke it, all of a sudden people realized that it was a possibility. And once they saw it was a possibility, they realized that they too could do it. And so then it opened his imagination opened the door for other people to do the same thing.
Exactly. And I know who that guy was, because I run, so people know.
Yeah, I figured you would when you said that earlier.
The next thing is a 2-hour marathon, but they're not quite up to that yet. They tried, but we're not successful.
I know you use the word lucky, but generally you don't believe in.
Yeah,
in
I would
luck.
say, yeah, I agree. That's why I say lucky. Like, it's not, it's a result of effort. I don't believe it's luck. I believe it's some level of divine inspiration or intervention or intuition that comes from effort. I don't think that's not the type of luck that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the type of luck where, like you said, you say, okay, I'm going to go do that, or I'm going to have the confidence that I'm going to find something, and I'm going to put effort into being lucky. Yeah. Austin?
Yeah. Can you expand a little on the necessity to hit rock bottom to make change, and like if there's any potential to sort of do that self-analysis without going to such a, vulnerable or low place, or sort of what the time cycle is, if it's just around Rosh Hashanah that yearly we sort of go into that depth, or sort of some different approaches to make change, maybe where the opportunity is without hitting rock bottom.
Well, because we talked about addictions, I think everybody's rock bottom is a personal place. Like, I don't think I can tell you what your rock bottom is, you can't tell me what my rock bottom is. And I happen to not believe that. I don't think that everybody needs to hit rock bottom. I think that people could trust other people and know what a rock bottom might theoretically feel like, and then they can change before they get there. So I don't know, maybe it's just a different way of thinking, that I don't know if you necessarily have to hit rock bottom. I think when you,
who is a wise person? One who learns from
right,
other people.
right. I think you could climb out of a well with a rope, or you could, hit the bottom and bounce back up. There's 2 different ways of doing it. So I don't really know, and I don't think it's a magical time where it automatically happens this time of year. I think because of what I was mentioning historically about Har Sinai, this is when we do it. But really, we're supposed to be doing this daily. People who pray daily are praying for forgiveness daily. They're praying for themselves on a daily basis. We don't just only pray for ourselves now. But I think that there's power in community. I think there's power in people. And like you said, learning from other people's experiences and watching other people. I don't think you have to hit rock bottom. I think if you find people that you trust who've hit what they describe as their own rock bottom, then they could share that experience with you, and you could learn from that and grow from that and change as well. That's what I think.
You mentioned, you touched on the subject of things that you know. You made a reference to that when you were speaking, but then there's things that you don't know, which is things to discover. You know, like people who haven't experienced the 12-step program. You know, so you may know about that, but you said you never participated in that, so you don't know really what that's all about per se, but you learned about it, and but you still don't know about that particular that experience. And then there's a third realm, the things that you don't know that you don't know. I think that's where really the gold is, because once you open up that area of things that you don't know, that they're not even part of your being, you know, those are the things that give you the power to give you the foundation to keep you strong and keep you from falling.
So what do you suggest? How do you start knowing things that you don't know?
The things that you don't know that you don't know?
Yeah.
Not the things that you don't know,
Right.
but the things you don't know that you don't know.
I think the highest level we can reach is to know that you don't know. How do you not know that you don't know? That's beyond.
So I'll tell you what I was taught by my teachers, and what I learn about, and what I tell people, is to start with what you do know. I think you're right. I think in the level of knowledge that you have about yourself grows. And the best thing I think that you can tell anybody is to start with what you do know. And I know that I do that with my children, and I do that with students when I ask them a question. And the first thing that they say is, well, I don't know. And I say, well, start with what you do know. Like if you're opening up something, and you know, a text that you've never read before, and the first thing that you do is say, well, I don't know how to read. Well, you know something. Well, start with what you do know. And I think if you start with what you do know, and you polish that, and you work with that, and you grow with that, then I know for myself, I find that my knowledge starts to grow, and my knowledge about myself starts to grow. But I would say that you have to start with something that you do know. And I think we all know things about ourselves. I mean, maybe we know too much. I mean, there's no such thing as knowing too much about ourselves, but we know things. We know where to start changing. I know where to start changing. I know what I need to do. I'm just sometimes don't have the courage to do it. So I'm not going to start with something that I don't know, or something that I don't know that I don't know. I'm going to start with something that I do know. And if I start with something that I do know, and I start some kind of process, and that works, then first of all, I'll go back to feeling better about myself. And once I feel better about myself, then I'll be able to work more. And, you know, in one of the sources that I skipped over, the Gemara, the Talmud says that a wise person is better than a prophet, because we value wisdom, we value knowledge. We don't value prophecy as much. Prophecy is just, okay, I happen to have a prophecy. But wisdom that comes from what you're talking about, wisdom that comes from life experience, nothing beats that.
To give you an example, when I'm referring to things you don't know that you don't know, so you take a secular person who grows up in a family who's secular, and they don't know that they don't even know what Shabbat is. They don't even know what that experience is like.
Seriously, why is that the gold?
What's that?
Why is that considered the gold? You said that's the gold or
Well,
gold.
Well, having a Shabbat experience is, you know, getting closer to the Torah.
So
and
not know what
getting-
you don't know is not the gold.
What do you mean? What do you mean? How do you?
Not experiencing Shabbos is the gold.
Not
The opposite.
the opposite. Experiencing Shabbos.
And getting to what you don't know.
Experiencing Shabbos is the gold. That's part of discovering the gold. Having that Shabbos experience.
So I would say that you expand always what you know. And you expand what you know with your experiences. And I think if we go back to the beginning, to your imagination, if you could imagine new experiences, and you could introduce yourself to new people and new experiences, then your knowledge grows, then your wisdom grows, then your understanding grows. And then once you have that new knowledge and new experience and new understanding, and then that snowball happens where you use that, and you're constantly using your experiences. But I think to embrace new experiences and to embrace new understandings and new ways of looking at life and new ways of looking at yourself, that's where the gold is, I think.
The shop for a Jew. If we're talking about a Jew, we're talking about what is in the Torah to keep Shabbat. So that's in the Torah, and Jews who grow up and they don't even know what that experience is like. It's like maybe that's what they've been dreaming of their whole life, but they've never had a Shabbat experience.
Or maybe you're somebody like me who grew up with a Shabbat experience every Shabbat of my life since I was born. And sometimes it's not inspirational at all. It's just another day where I'm in the middle of a good book and I don't feel God and I don't feel spiritual and I don't feel holy and I don't feel particularly religious. It's just another day. So I think the process of trying to squeeze all the meaning out of Shabbat is a lifelong process. It doesn't matter if you were born Orthodox or not born Orthodox or how you were raised. There's always a personal, I can make this better. I can make this better. I can make this more meaningful. I can make this more a part of my life in a meaningful way. And that process never ends.
Yeah.
Never,
I think,
ever, ever
I
ends.
think it's more than what I'm thinking, because the Kli Yakar, which I read a lot, and he says the tachlit of chachma, the goal, the purpose of wisdom is to eventually arrive to the point where you know that you don't know. That's a very humbling place to be. So that's why maybe semantics, I didn't really understand what you're saying. You're talking from more experiential.
Just to clarify, growing up, I never had a Shabbos experience. So I didn't even know what that was. I had no clue until 1999 with Rebbetzin Young Rice. So,
I'm
yeah.
jealous. I really am. I am jealous because I never had that, and I never will have the opportunity to have that because I had a Shabbos experience since I was born. So I never had the opportunity to approach it new and be inspired by it. It's different for me, and I think everybody's experience is like that. I just want to get some more. There's more people who want to.
No, I just want to reply to you that sometimes inspiration, it's like only catching what the word and Hashem tell you, and sometimes you think about secular experience, but I'm talking about the experience of Europe, like a person that is completely distant from a Jewish environment, and anyway, that message arrives to him. And sometimes it's only a matter of being open to new messages and to understanding what the word and what Hashem is telling you. So everybody has a chance, but to have an inspiration and experience of Teshuvah or go to do it, but has to be open to new input and keep your heart open to the word, and something will arrive. You just have to be open.
Shkoyach. And I'm sure many people, I also want to say something. Just in terms of Shabbat, I've been more Shomer Shabbat in my life than I haven't been. Okay, so I'm Baal Tshuva, but from an early age. And I was taught that every Shabbat is different. Every week is different. Every day is different. Every prayer, if you add something to your prayer, you were not Yotzi. So you could be, when people do get stuck in, a road situation. But I think that being in an environment, as you said, community, people don't allow that to happen. They care enough about each other and inspire each other on a continuous basis. I was told if you walk back, you walk forward 3 steps, you walk back 3 steps, and you're not a changed person, you didn't accomplish anything in prayer. And every Shabbat is different. That is what I was taught, and I think that maybe it left more to my imagination.
I agree. I agree. I just want to stress, and I think that I did stress that it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard work.
Challenge.
None of this is easy. It is not easy to grow. It is not easy to change. It is not easy to find inspiration. But because it's so difficult, that's where the payoff is. And I think hopefully together in whatever community everybody's in, we could inspire each other and get through the next 40 days, and then another 40 and another 40 and another 40. Like, you know, Moses was up there 3 times. It didn't work the first time or the second time or the third time. And it was over and over and over again. And every precedent in the entire history of the Jewish people, the religious history of the Jewish people, every achievement came after great struggle. And falling and falling and falling and falling and falling and getting up again. And there are verses about that, and there are stories all throughout the Gemara about falling and getting up and falling and getting up and falling and getting up. So if you fall, you can get up, and if you can't get up by yourself, you can find somebody to help you. And hopefully together we can do that. I guess I could just end because it just dawned on me. A rabbi of mine once taught me that a hand in Hebrew is called a yad, and a yad is the letters Yud and Dalet, and the numerical value, if you go according to the numerology of the Hebrew alphabet, a Yud is 10 and a Dalet is 4. So Yud Dalet, the word for Yad, is 14. And if you look at a hand, you have 14 knuckles. You have 1, 2, 3 on each finger, except 3, 6, 9, 12, and 2. So your hand is called a Yad, and you have 14 knuckles. If you take one Yad and you put it together with another Yad, then you have Koach. 14 and 14 is strength. So sometimes, if by yourself you don't have the strength, you can join with somebody else, and then you could find the strength. So an evening like this, perhaps we could all find strength together, and hopefully have what we call a ksiva v'chsima tova.
Amen.